Okay, it's 7 o'clock. So good evening all. Welcome to the first Health and Adult Social Care Policy Accountability Committee of 2025. I hope you all had a good start to the year. My name is Councillor Natalia Perez, and I'm the chair of the Health and Adult Social Care Policy Accountability Committee. Before we start, I have a few housekeeping points. This meeting is being live streamed to the Council's YouTube channel. By participating, you are consenting to being recorded. Please, can officers and guests introduce themselves when they first address the committee? If the fire alarm sounds, please leave the meeting in an orderly fashion by the staff fire exit, which is behind me to my right. Officers will direct you to the assembly point in Riverside Gardens. Agenda item number 1, apologies for absence, and we have received apologies from Councillor Rosenberg. And also we have apologies for lateness from Councillor Bobby. She's on her way, but she'll join us shortly. Before we proceed with the next agenda item, I wanted to first thank Emma Absworth for her contributions to this committee and wish her all the best in her future plans. Agenda item number 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? I'm looking at the screen as well. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 3, minutes. Do members agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of November 2024? Welcome, we've just started. As an accurate record? Yes? Yes, great, thank you very much. And also, thank you, David. There has been some correspondence following up some of the actions that were agreed at the last meeting. Agenda item number 4, 2025-2026, revenue budget and medium-term financial strategy. So this report provides an update. Yes.
Could I just raise something coming from the minutes? It really is matters arising. There were 3 things came up, and they're all simple, actually, at the end of the last meeting. There were good discussions where we were told that there were maps available to deprivation, and they might go out. They haven't. So I'm wondering, it would be quite helpful if we saw the deprivation maps. There was a second thing on a very good discussion raised by Victoria, and that was that disabled people would work with the councillors to organise a conference to work out what it is they'd like to say to the acute trusts about kind of equipment, facilities, etc. So I'm curious as to what progress has been made on that. And there was a third thing, there was a really good detailed report from Julius about care homes, and there was a question about the gap between demand and availability and the time lag between demand and getting a place. And we were told that was available and would be around after the meeting. It hasn't come, so I'm wondering whether those 3 things which came up from, and they're positive proposals, by the way.
Thank you very much. I know there was some correspondence earlier today that followed up on some of the actions. Now, in relation to the first one that you're raising, deprivation map.
Yeah, that's my mistake. Sorry about that. I'll send them with the PAC.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Lang. The second ones, we were organizing, well, we're going to be organizing a conference. Councillor Sanderson?
No, that's fine. I think you're about to say it, Chair. So we are looking at the dates. Obviously, with the by-elections, things are a little bit pushed back. So I think we will be looking at autumn for it to make sure that we can co-produce it effectively. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And in relation to the care homes, we will follow that up with Julia directly, or we'll do that. Thank you very much. And Accountability Committee. We are invited to comment on the budget proposal set out in detail in the appendices. And first of all, we've got Councillor Ree, Cabinet Member for Finance and Reform, who will introduce the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair. Rowan Ree, Cabinet Member for Finance and Reform. I wanted to start by thanking you and the committee for inviting me here to talk through the budget this evening. I also wanted to thank Councillor Sanderson and my fellow Cabinet members, James, Prakash, and all of the finance officers who've been involved in putting the budget together, and Jackie and everybody working in the departments who've done such a fantastic job over the course of the last year, realising savings and making sure that we can put together a balanced budget that we can present to the full council in February. So I'm just going to give a brief talk through of an overview of the budget as a whole, and then we're going to hear from officers about some of the specific measures that this committee will be particularly interested in around health and adult social care. So just to kick off, I'll give a bit of an overview of the budget. So this year, the budget is a net budget of £221 million. I think anyone who's been watching the news will know that it's not a particularly easy time to be putting together budgets in local government. You know, our revenue funding since 2010 has dropped by 54%. We used to get £164 million in 2010. This year it was just 132 million, so both a cash terms and a real terms reduction. But it's not just the change in the grants that's making it harder for councils across the country. Changing demographics and a sluggish national economy for a number of years have meant that there's been an increase in demand for council services, which is really stretching budgets in a number of areas. That said, we have had a little bit of help this year with the budget. This slide provides a bit of detail about some of the new sources of funding that are available to local government. In Hammersmith and Fulham, we'll get a small slice of these, but things like an extra £2 billion for social care, an extra £1 billion from the Household Support Fund, something that's been extended by this government, an extra £1 billion for SEND services, and an extra 500 million from the new affordable homes. So when we look to put a budget together, there are a number of things really that we're trying to do. First and foremost, and I think the most important priority for all areas of government is to try and protect the people who we're here to serve. I'll go into a little bit more detail later on about how it is we're doing that with this year's budget. Very importantly for us, we want to protect the statutory services that the council provides and we're required to provide, but also there's additional services that we provide here in H&F that residents value so much, things like free home care, things like free breakfast for primary school children, things like the local law enforcement teams, and things like our very comprehensive council tax support scheme. Growth is a bit of a buzzword at the moment in national politics and everywhere, but you know, we're trying to promote prosperity as well here in the borough. And so that's why we're investing in things like our industrial strategy. The aim with that is that in future years, if we increase the business rate take, then it means that we'll have more money coming in and it'll be easier to fund services in the future. Looking inwards, we want to make sure that we're running the council as efficiently as possible, and also that we have the right governance processes in place to make sure that that money isn't going missing, that money is being spent in the right place, and most importantly, money is being used to the betterment of the people who live in Hammersmith and Fulham, and that we're putting money aside for a rainy day. So should we get into trouble in the future, should there be any major issues that arise, we'll be able to deal with those. And last but certainly not least, we're very proud in this borough of our record when it comes to council tax. We're the third lowest council tax in the country. And so preserving that is something that we are very keen to do, and that's something that this budget does. So if I move on to the headlines of the budget, this is a budget to fund the fight against crime and antisocial behaviour here in Hammersmith and Fulham, with over £3.5 million being invested, not just in fighting crime, but also the causes of crime. So we're using this money to invest in our law enforcement team, to invest in our innovative gangs unit, which keeps young people out of a life of organised crime. We're investing new money in prevention of violence against women and girls. Last year, we became the first council to have a borough-wide PSPO, Public Space Protection Order, that would prevent street harassment of women across the whole of the borough. That's something we're very proud of, and we want to invest more in making sure that women and girls in Hammersmith and Fulham feel safe. But also in those measures to prevent crime, we're investing in our school attendance strategy, And through our digital inclusion strategy, we're looking to make sure that everybody in the borough is able to identify fraud, the fastest growing crime in the UK. Another major aspect to this budget is easing the pressure that we have on some of our statutory services. So councils across the country are really facing rising demand in a number of areas where they are required by law to provide services to anybody who presents as needing them. Things like homelessness, things like adult social care. We know that these are areas where there is going to be real strain in the future. And so we want to make sure that we're redirecting money into those services now so that we're able to cope with an increase in demand should it come, and to cope with the extra demand we've seen in recent years. Finally, there's some extra investment in upstream, which I mentioned before. This is our industrial strategy. We've so far, the industrial strategy has generated £6 billion of investment into the area, created 13,000 jobs. We want to make sure that that investment and those jobs are benefiting the people who live here as well. People living in the White City estate who see these great new buildings going up and they see the exciting stuff that's going on there, they should be able to take part in that as well. And so we want to make sure that the community is a big part of that industrial strategy. We're also investing in the fight against climate change, one of the biggest issues, not just for our borough, but our country and our planet. And we're investing in sports facilities to make sure that people living in the borough who want to get outside, who want to be active, are able to do so. So this provides a bit of an overview of some of the key figures in the budget. Obviously, we start with our extra inflation spending. This is putting money into departments to make sure that they're able to cope with an increase in pay when it comes, and that contracts are able to adjust for inflation as well. We've got £12.3 million of new investment in this budget, and I'll go through some of the details of where that is later on. We've managed to find £5.1 million worth of efficiencies. That's on top of the £133 million that this administration has found in the time we've been in office. And we can see here an increase of £7.8 million in government grants, which I mentioned some of those earlier at the start of this presentation. If I skip now onto our investment proposal, so this is where that £12.3 million I mentioned is being spent. You'll see the largest slice of that going towards the law enforcement team, the gangs unit, and preventing violence against women and girls. That's what I spoke about earlier in terms of keeping residents safe. That's £3.4 million. The second largest chunk, I think, could be of interest to this committee, and that's towards adult services, £2.8 million. We're also putting £2.2 million into children's services, £1.8 million into our waste collection service, and £1.2 million into temporary accommodation and preventing homelessness within the borough. You'll also see the investment there in upstream and some of our finance and corporate services that we're putting more money into. And then if you go on to our savings, this is where our £5.1 million of efficiencies have been found. You'll see it's a fairly broad spread from across the council. All departments have worked really hard to identify savings here. Police department, £1.7 million. From adult services, we've had £750,000, over £1 million from children's services, and then a number of our corporate redesigns, which I'll touch on a little bit shortly. Now, council tax, as I mentioned earlier, we're very proud to have the third lowest council tax in the country. We are maintaining that. A Band D council tax in 2024-25 was just £915. The increase that we're seeing today would be the equivalent of 88 pence per week, assuming that somebody is paying the full rate. We know that with our comprehensive council tax support scheme, 4 in 10 households receive some sort of discount, and the most vulnerable residents in the borough receive 100% discount. We're one of only 3 councils in London to provide that. So those least able to pay the least. We've got a slide now just which shows how the budget is spread across the council's 4 departments. The people department, which is the one I'm sure this committee will be interested in, is seeing an extra £5 million of growth spending, as well as inflation of 3.5 million. So a total of 6.7 when you consider the efficiencies as well. If we move on to reserves, for the last 2 years, this council has run a budget surplus. We've got to the end of the year underspending what we targeted. That's allowed us to increase our general balances. Now, these are what I like to think of as our sort of rainy day funds. So should something, should there be an issue in the future where we need to spend money, this is the pots that we'll be able to draw from. Although, as I say, we've got a balanced budget this year, so we're not planning on doing that. I think it's quite remarkable that for the last 2 years, we've been able to run a budget surplus at a time when most councils around the country have been taking money out of their reserves in order to balance their budget. We've been able to put money in, and that's made us a lot more resilient to some of the difficulties that we're seeing now. We also have our earmarked reserves. Now, these are here to ready to smooth large items of spending over a number of years. So, for instance, if we know that we're going to have to make an investment in 4 years' time of £1 million for a new computer system, rather than finding £1 million within the year, we can find £250,000 for the 4 years beforehand, and then we know we've got the money there. So the £73.5 million we have in earmarked reserves are set aside for specific projects, and you'll see over the next 4 years how that plans to go up and down depending on where money needs to be spent. We're never just planning for 1 year with our budgets. We're always planning a number of years ahead, and work has already started on next year's. But in terms of a medium-term financial strategy, we know that there are going to be difficulties in the future. We know that we're going to have budget gaps to close, and this is how we're setting out to do it. Firstly, creating economic growth within the borough. I've mentioned our industrial strategy and the aim of increasing business rates. That will help us because it will generate additional revenue. In terms of looking at costs, we have a number of major service and corporate transformation programs, and we're looking to make the most of new technology and digital services to make sure that the council is operating as efficiently as possible and that our costs are kept down where they can be. We're looking at generating as much community infrastructure levy and Section 106 funds as we can. Last year, in fact, we generated £22 million, which is a record for this borough. The year before, it was £19 million, which was the previous record. So that's something that the council has been quite successful in when it comes to negotiating with property developers to make sure that the community benefits from developments as well as those who are taking part in them. And we're making sure that we're applying for and getting as much as we can from national grant programs. This is something we're seeing a huge increase in, particularly where it comes to green financing. So we need to make sure we're identifying all the potential pots of money we can be claiming on and making sure that our bids are as successful as possible. The next steps. So I'm coming to all of the PAC meetings. I'm glad I got to come to this one in the first week because this is my favourite PAC. So it's nice to be here. In February, we'll go to we'll take the budget to the cabinet, and then the full council will get to vote on it on the 26th of February in the budget meeting. So I'll hand over to the officers now to talk through some of the departmental specific projects.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ree.
Thank you, Jackie McShannon, Executive Director of People, and I'm going to lead the presentation, ably abetted by a number of colleagues. In fact, there are 4 sitting beside me. So Catherine Wilmot, I'll just get people to introduce themselves so that it doesn't interrupt the flow of the presentation.
Hi everyone, I'm Catherine Wilmot, Director of Adult Social Care.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Bright, Director of Commissioning Transformation and Health Partnerships.
Good evening, my name is Prakash Darren, I'm Head of Finance covering social care and public health.
Hi, Nikki Lang, Director of Public Health.
Thank you very much. And if we have the first slide, please, Prakash. Thank you very much. So when adult social care and public health merged with Children's to form the People Directorate, we availed ourselves the opportunity to renew and restate our vision. And I want to be clear that the new vision absolutely incorporates the values that were shared with you at the last January budget PAC. Those really important values of helping and supporting our residents, enabling and empowering our residents to live healthy and independent lives. And where that is not the optimum, to ensure the provision of excellent care to our residents. We absolutely are wedded to co-production, working in partnership, to choice, control, and ensuring the highest quality services in everything that we do. Now, that might seem to be stating the obvious, but I really want to emphasise that there has been no deviation from those core values in this new refreshed vision. I say that because I'm conscious that there has been some instability, some change, some churn across adult social care in the last 2-year period. And I want to provide reassurance that actually those core values underpin everything that we do and continue to do so. So I also want to, one of the purposes of restating it is that we became aware of, with that change, and there's been some change of personnel throughout adult social care, that actually there was a bit of a disjunction between the strategic values and how they were understood and expressed in our day-to-day work. And it's really important that there is that golden thread so that our residents experience that not just in committees or in papers, but actually in their day-to-day experience in the practice of all our staff. We know that our staff are very committed, they're very caring. We want to ensure that actually they also demonstrate those values as I've just described. So if we just go on, Prakash, please. So despite some change, the objectives, the goals that again were set out for you in the last year's Policy and Accountability Committee, again, I want to provide reassurance that there's been no lessened commitment to those, and they remain our key priorities with the addition of new ones, because clearly a new leadership team also brings some fresh vision and perspective. Now, I always worry that when you bullet point some achievements, it sort of belittles the amount of effort and thought that has been put into them, and these are very high level. They build on what's gone before, and I think it's fair to say that we are bringing renewed pace and vigour to ensuring the programmes of delivery. Now, some of what was stated last year may not have been realised at the same pace and may not always have progressed, but actually because there's been a necessary internal focus as we realign ourselves and also take the opportunity to take stock and evaluate what we're doing, how we're doing, and what we want to do. And I think that's normal, good business practice. But again, I want to provide that very clear statement of commitment to the direction of travel. I'm going to ask first Catherine and then Nikki, just to highlight Catherine on this slide, and then Nikki in the next, just some key achievements that we've realised during the year. So Catherine, please.
Thanks, Jackie. So I'm not going to read through that whole list, but I will pick out a couple in a moment. But what I would say about all of these achievements is they're key building blocks to enable us to achieve that bolder transformation. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go through the presentation. But I think those ambitions and those aspirations that you've heard before are still there, as Jackie said. But this is where we start to try and build and achieve and deliver those ambitions and aspirations. So the first one I'll draw your attention to is around the annual review team. So we had some investment to recruit some additional staff because we were not keeping on top of our annual reviews, and not everybody was getting a statutory annual review when they should. We've now managed to double the number of annual reviews that we're doing. And one of the benefits of that for residents is that it's an opportunity for residents to tell us, are things still working for them? Do they need some different support? Is there something else that's not quite right in their lives that we could help them with? And it also means that where people are getting care that isn't right for them, and sometimes people tell us that by, for example, not being at home if a home carer calls because they really don't need that home carer to do whatever they were coming for. It's really important we put that right. So the annual reviews have been quite critical in making sure that people are getting the right care and continue to receive the right care and support. And we're very pleased that we've been able to do that. It also means that for residents who are receiving care and support, they have an opportunity to check in because things change all the time. We commission and develop different services at different points in the year, and people may not be aware of some different services and supports that are out in the community and that they may wish to access. So that's been very welcomed by residents. Additionally, we had investment to launch the transitions team, and this is a team that works with young people who are currently cared for under children's services, but are becoming adults and will be supported by adult services. In the past, I think many young people and their families have experienced that as being a bit patchy, a little bit inconsistent in terms of their experience, and perhaps not always as person-centered and focused on their needs as a young person as we would have liked it to have been. The transitions team has made a huge difference to that process. We now have almost 80% permanent staff in that team. It's taken some time to get to that point because we want to get people with the right skills and the right experience. Young people and their families have been involved in the recruitment and the development of that team. We've now got pathways, processes, policies, all in place, which sounds very dry, but those are the things that can make a difference to a person's experience when they're transferring their care between different parts of the same council. And we know that we're doing that so much better because people tell us, and we've had lots of unsolicited, informal feedback from people saying, this is great, thank you, really appreciate your help, you've really made a difference. And I think it's really important not to lose sight of the fact that's a continued development. We're not perfect yet, but a huge amount of work has gone into that, into improving that. And I think it gives a real example of some of the benefits of bringing together adult social care with children's services, because we have a much closer working relationship than perhaps we might have had in the past. But that work continues to develop, but it is a real success story, I think, and it's worth highlighting. And finally, the last one I'd pull out there is the improved response times for people needing assessments. Because sometimes people were waiting quite a long time for a core assessment. They didn't have to wait for services. We would make sure people were supported if we couldn't allocate them for an assessment straight away, but people were waiting sometimes. So we set about trying to improve that, and we've doubled the number of assessments we've completed in the last 12 months. It's a huge increase in activity. And we've done that not by taking on extra staff, but by working much better and more efficiently and making sure that if we can support people when they first contact us and we can point them in the right direction of the care and support they need, then that resolves the need for a larger core assessment. So those proportionate assessments are really important. And that's hugely improved our response times to people. It's improved the quality of the assessments that we're doing. And again, we've had feedback from people saying to us, thank you, really appreciate that. Thought I was going to have to wait months and months, and actually it hasn't been that long. So really pleased with the direction of travel in all of these areas. Continues to be a focus, because if we don't get these things right, it's much harder to put in place some of those bold innovations that we are so ambitious for. We want to be the best adult social care department that we possibly can be. The best in the country would be my ambition, but but it's for residents to tell us when we're the best. You can't measure that just by data. And I think one of the things about these areas that I've highlighted is it is local residents saying to us, actually, we see a difference, and thank you for that. Although I always say this, we're still working on it. We don't get it right every time, but we're working very hard to make sure we get it right almost all of the time. I'll hand over to,
Sorry, just there. Oops. Sorry, and thank you very much, Catherine. Just a couple of things. I talked about the change in workforce, and we are mitigating that with a new workforce strategy. And again, that's been a benefit of working with children's. We're learning from how children's success in retaining staff, in creating career progression opportunities for staff, and attending to their welfare and well-being. And that is something that's been a big preoccupation of Catherine. I'm speaking for you, but myself. But again, that's a great synergy. And underpinning all of that has been a new enhanced quality assurance framework. We take governance and quality assurance, performance management very, very seriously. And we have now very explicit attention and time given to those, because that underpins the achievement of all that we have said that we will do. But if we could move to the next slide, please, and just invite Nikki to make some comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. So a couple of the achievements, as colleagues know, we have the highest suicide rate in London. a lot of work on suicide has happened in the borough, including our Reach Out campaign, which launched in 2024 in partnership with Fuller's Breweries. A lot of work is happening in particular with the Listening Place, which is a local charity on Shepherd's Bush Road. The other achievement I would point to is our drug and alcohol services. So before 2022, we had separate drug services from Turning Point and alcohol services from Change, Grow, Live. We retendered those to have a fully integrated service now provided by Turning Point. So we've brought them both together, and we have exceeded our numbers for numbers in treatment. It is very hard to get people into treatment, but we've exceeded our targets, and we have the highest continuity of care. That means that when people have a drug need and they come home to us from prison, we immediately pick them up and get them into treatment, because otherwise they have a high risk of death. And we have the highest continuity of care at 48% for London. So thank you very much.
Thank you. If we move on then to challenges and risks, and as Councillor Ree said, the national funding challenges for adult social care are very well known, and we welcome Baroness Casey being invited to chair the Independent Commission looking at reforms to the funding of adult social care. So while we are in the fortunate position of not having to announce swinging cuts, clearly it is incumbent on us to ensure that we are working effectively and efficiently to deliver services within our means. We are experiencing a number of pressures, and again, these aren't unfamiliar to you. Sorry, I'm just going to bring that a little bit closer. So nationally and locally, we are seeing an increase in the numbers of older and disabled residents requiring adult social care, and we are forecasting cumulative total of cost pressures of 6 million by 2027. And we're seeing people live longer, but with greater needs. And that is something to be celebrated, of course, but it is also a challenge for us to think about how we can optimally meet those needs. There are, again, this is not unusual to H&F, but we are seeing care provider inflation increases in London living wages, employers, and national insurance contributions, and then the unquantified employment rights bill. So there are greater pressures than just the inflationary increase proposed in the budgets. And added to this, we are seeing funding challenges within the wider health and social care economy. So the most immediate of these is the North West London Integrated Care Board's Better Care Fund review and subsequent financial efficiencies that may likely impact on our services and our budgets. So I think if we just move on to the next slide, Catherine started to talk about thinking about what we do and evolving and changing that. And again, I said this at the Children's and Education PAC, it's actually, it's really important that we are creative and that we are courageous in constantly reviewing what we do, our models of delivery, looking at outcomes, and really matching that against just our current understanding of need and emerging needs. And we want to look at that in partnership with current service users, but also engage with future service users, those that will be aging into the over 65, over 75 populations. So we are at the outset of a transformation journey. And I'm going to ask Sarah to talk a little bit more about that. It is something that you probably want to ask me loads about, but actually I want to really restate that we're at the outset. So if I had the answers, I wouldn't have done what we're committed to, which is working in partnership with people to develop that. But could I ask Sarah, please, to just talk us a little bit through some of our strategic intentions?
Thanks, Jackie. So I think we need to respond to all of the challenges that have been set out in front of us today from the financial perspective, and to try and meet the rising demand and complexity of need that we're seeing in our residents today. And it is a really, really tricky challenge for us to try and address within the financial constraints and the limited resources that we've got available. It's something that we can't do on our own, and we need to absolutely do in partnership with our community, our third sector partners, our health colleagues, and work collectively as a whole system to try and address and meet those challenges together. I would like to stress the emphasis of that whole system approach, because it's a journey and it's a pathway of a system through as needs continue to escalate and through, and you see that playing out in our hospitals in terms of the demands and the pressures that we're seeing there in terms of bed spaces that are available, the impact on A&E, and our role is very much to try and prevent and support our hospitals by meeting needs earlier and through our community offer, but also at the other end in terms of that discharge and support out back into the community and support people to remain as independent as they possibly can be. And that is the crux of it, is independent living. The vision is absolutely right and the ambition is absolutely right. And the strategic approach is translating that vision into what does that mean in terms of how we work together as a partnership, as a system, and the kinds of services that we need to have in place in order to make that become a reality. The pressures that we're facing in terms of that system is that we just don't have the local provision that we need to meet that rising demand on our services. So it's about how we are innovative and creative within the resources that we've got to reprofile those as best we possibly can to meet needs at the optimum way that we can, right place, right time. And that will take some sort of ingenuity to really think about how can we redirect, reshape our provision. And that's not an overnight solution. We need more local provision, and that does not turn up overnight. We need to work with our partners and our communities to really think about what that looks like. We are really, really fortunate in our borough with the range of partners that we have. And the services that we have. So it's thinking about our reablement offer, it's thinking about our community sector providers, the role of family hubs within that space, assistive technology, and making best use of that to better support people in their homes. And the more and better we can support people to stay well for longer, the more we then can protect our services at the top end, making sure that we're protecting them for those that need it the most. So there's a huge amount of work that we're going to be taking on over the next sort of 12 to 18 months in terms of understanding that placement and sufficiency landscape to really get to know exactly what we need to develop locally. For example, in response to the work that we're doing around transitions, we are seeing those young people coming into our care in adult social care, and we need to make sure that we've got the right provision there for them. Otherwise, they will not have the support that they need to be as independent as they should be able to be. So some of this is about transforming the existing provision that we've got to create the new provision that we need, and reinvesting some of our existing provision, because for example, we are spot purchasing quite a lot. We have to go out and buy additional placements on top of those that we have available locally. And obviously that comes at generally greater cost. But actually, if we use that and redirected it differently, we can create more local provision to meet that need coming out from hospital. So it's a huge amount of work around placement sufficiency and developing that local offer in a preventative and kind of early intervention way. And that is broadly it.
Thank you very much. So I hope that sort of begins to demonstrate the energy and vision that we bring, as I say, building on what went before. Prakash, if we could just move on, thank you. And actually, both Sarah and Catherine have spoken very eloquently about, for example, how the work we're doing around transitions really can inform those next steps. And we're seeing that Sarah's mentioned family hubs. We also want to be working with health. We've created a new combined health post that allows more opportunity. We want to engage more productively with our health partners and as to really generate those solutions. And Sarah used words like imagination and ingenuity, and I used words like creativity and courage. And I think all of that we hope to exemplify as we move through this. Just in terms of next steps and the sort of immediate pieces, so we do plan to phase this. As I've said, that we've had a bit of internal work looking at regularizing contracts, ensuring that we're fully compliant with procurement and contract regulation. Sarah's very hot on that, and we've had quite a lot of work to do. Catherine, as I said, has been very focused on the workforce, and that's ongoing. We absolutely value our workforce, and we want to ensure that they are skilled up and they are supported, and that they want to stay with Hammersmith and Fulham going forward. And then the strategic planning that we've been talking about is very much part and of the work that we've been generating in the last while. We've got a phase 2 and phase 3. There's not a big bang. We want to think about what we're doing very carefully, and I won't repeat what Sarah said about working in partnership to really scope and develop that further. And if we just move on now to the finance slides, I'm going to ask Prakash to just focus on those, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. So while the whole systems approach and change comes through, obviously there's still services to be provided. So for next year for social care, the gross budget is proposed at £121 million, which is actually a 6.4 million increase from this year's budget. So that's quite important to bear that in mind. The Council of Review has already talked about the investment in social care, £2.8 million of investment. Most of that will be going towards the pressures we've got this year on residential nursing placements. We are supporting more residents through the acuity of need and through demographics, but also 2 million or so towards inflationary pressures, and those are going to only increase given the pressures on the budget strain on non-living wage that colleagues have alluded to. We are making some efficiencies at 650k in adult social care. Many of those are in the PAC, in the papers, are things we've done in the past and building on that going forward through that. So I appreciate the numbers a little bit small, but so sorry for that. But in essence, we are spending a significant portion of the budget, obviously, on frontline care services like we normally do, kind of thing around that. Nearly 94 million of that 121 is spent on residential, nursing, home care, supporting living, and direct payment residents, kind of thing around that. 12% of the business is managed in terms of staffing, kind of thing around that. And then we've got some internal services for SP and third sector commission services that are adults focused as opposed to the general investment program. So it is a stepped increase in the budget proposed for sign off in February with some, fair bit of investment on top of the investment we had in 24-25, particularly the home care and transitions. And the last slide is on public health funding. So this grant at the moment is 24.4 million. It's this year's figure. We've not yet known from government yet next year's announcement. Last year it came early February, kind of thing around that. A little bit optimistic, we get a few 100,000 extra because obviously the inflation pressures from that, but that's only just a guess, kind of thing around that. So again, in terms of the pie split, we've got 4 major contract streams that Dr. Lang sort of alluded to some areas of that in terms of the substance misuse services, behavioural change, family services and sexual health. 14 million of that 24 million goes to those services that are provided by the health or third sector providers. A significant portion of the grant, no change from last year, is spent on services that the council offers through the public health and meets public health outcomes. So a whole range of services in the council in all departments. Examples would be, for example, in housing and in homelessness, in place, in environmental health, get some grant funding. In our own department, place department, there are support in early helps, and adult supporting people, family services that get public health funding. So 34% of the grant goes to internally funded services. And then 9% is for a range of management services that are staff, as well as other staff in other council services that public health funds. So that's the 24 million, but like I'm saying, we're waiting for next year's grant, and then we'll set out a plan accordingly for it.
Thank you. So just to finish, I think that adult social care has enjoyed significant investment from this council, and I think that's a measure of the commitment from the political and corporate leadership. Clearly, the savings we're making this year are very modest, given the size of our budget, indeed the size of people's budget. And I think it's right and proper that we look to see what we can do to help the council in the face of those national challenges and those. We are very fortunate to be a council that is not facing any 114 notices, and actually adult social care, public health and children's, I can speak for, are very committed to working diligently to ensure that we are able to identify the possibility of any efficiencies of doing things differently to support the health of the council's budget going forward. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Jackie, Catherine, Sarah, Prakash, Nicola, for that presentation and all the updates that you've given us, and also that vision and a strategy and how we're moving forward towards those strategic intentions that you've alluded to, Jackie. So I'll invite members of the committee. Do you have any questions or comments?
If I could make a couple of comments and ask a question, because a couple of things I don't quite understand. First of all, I think it's miraculous that you stayed within the budget, given from what I read about the stresses on councils financially up and down the country, or whatever political stripe they are. The fact of staying within budget seems to me something to talk about. And again, I think it's quite important because you're potentially a model for the whole country in giving free adult social care for those who need care like that. And I think a pat on the back there really should be given in public for that. A couple of questions. Looking at some challenges. One is discharge from hospital. And the reason I ask that is that at the ICB board meeting last week, held in Kensington Town Hall, one thing caught my eye, and that was, it was said that H&F had the longest waiting to find beds in the community of all North West London councils. Now, that wasn't elaborated upon in the meeting, but it was actually there in the papers. And I was just wondering whether you'd like to elaborate on that, and because sometimes things are written very carelessly, as I know from somebody who goes to all of those meetings. And the second thing is, Sarah talked about challenges for provision. Could you be specific as to what those challenges might be? And a third one would be really on how the interface between provision you've got at the moment and mental health services. And the reason I ask that is that I've noticed a drift in ICB papers where nobody was being sent out of area a year ago, then a tiny number. At the most recent papers, there were almost 300 people being sent out of area. And I'm wondering whether that had any impact on our communities here. So they're genuine questions because I haven't got answers.
Shall I take that one first? Yeah, so with hospital discharge, we do have pretty good flow actually, and relatively low discharge or delayed discharges in Hammersmith and Fulham. We do sometimes have examples where, for one reason or another, an individual might have to wait a long time for a placement. And that might be due to individual choice because people want it in a particular area or they want particular features of a care home. It might be to do with an individual's needs. Sometimes people have very complex needs that it might need something very specific to be able to support them. So without knowing exactly what the detail of what they're talking about, it's difficult to say for sure, but generally we don't have huge numbers of delayed discharges in Hammersmith and Fulham, and we work very hard to get people out of the hospital quickly. But inevitably there are sometimes delays, and sometimes they are within our control and sometimes they're not.
Sure.
Very briefly, because in the presentation by the chair, Dr. Benny Dash, I did notice we were mentioned specifically, and I think it's, if things are working well, it's important things are set right so that we're not looked at as different from Ealing, Hounslow, Harrow, or whatever it might happen to be. Yeah.
Do you want me to respond to that piece about?
I think I'd probably like us to focus on the budget.
Okay.
Now because the ICB, I think we could talk about all night, given the papers on it. So if you wouldn't mind, Chair, just focusing on that for now, and then we could have maybe a separate conversation about the ICB. Thank you.
Ensure sufficiency of placements locally. We have a block bed arrangement for supported living around mental health. It's at capacity, and therefore we do end up spot purchasing out of borough placements to meet the need coming out.
Back, is that in tiny numbers or significant numbers, growing or steady state, if I can put it
I
like
would say
that?
it's well, there is a backlog in terms of hospital discharge. So there are a number of people that are waiting that could come out, and there are some people that are in the pipeline to come out. I'd have to get back to you on specifics in terms of the numbers, and that would be with West London Trust, because they hold that, and then we try and source the placements for them.
That does refer to mental health, just to clarify, yes. So it sounds slightly contradictory, but Sarah's talking about mental health. I was talking about acute care, so just to be clear.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there other questions?
Thank you very much. I thought that was really quite useful, and there are some good stories in there, very positive. We are heading in the right direction, and I have said this before. I have found that we do things a little better in Hammersmith and Fulham. There are still, as we're obviously hearing, there are things that need to be looked at and continued, which I think that is absolutely fair and reasonable. Just on the strategic intention, so is it about the independent living? Now, clearly, we want people to engage with independent living, but it still means that some of them are going to need care packages and everything else. Now, with and this is not political, so don't anybody jump at me yet. With the impact of wages going up, national insurance, is this, or has that been factored into the impact this is going to have on independent living? Because obviously people are going to need staff, and if there's an increase in wages and everything else, there is going to have an impact. Does that mean that we're going to be able to provide less provision than we would ordinarily like to?
I think the art of it is in how can we meet the challenge of meeting all of the statutory needs that we have within the existing resources that we have in the best way possible. So it might mean some reprofiling of what we've got in order to create the provision to meet that need. I think we're all clear that we would not meet need, but how we can think creatively about how those services are delivered in a different way in order to meet need. And there is something for me about that very point around the amount of additional cost we do spend on procuring additional capacity from other places. That does cost us more money generally than being able to provide the care and support locally. And that's what I really want to focus on, is providing that care and support locally, because it's better for the resident, but it's also more cost effective.
Thank you. And if I may come in, Councillor, I just building on Sarah's point, it's also looking at whether what we've currently commissioned is the right provision, and whether it's meeting needs. We are seeing changes in patterns with more residents, for example, choosing to take up direct payments. In the last year, we've seen a 16% growth in that. We're heading absolutely in the right direction in terms of being with the London average. We know that our home care is very popular, and that uptake is sort of 7.5 users per 1,000, which is almost twice the London average, and about 2 percentage points higher than the nearest closest London neighbour. So there's something about learning from those changes that our residents are expressing, and that's really a consonant with what I was saying about evaluating what we do and our modus operandi. So we want to be looking at our care home provision, and also just thinking about our independent living provision, working with our housing colleagues. And again, the advantage of that sort of seamless service between adults and children's and adults, social care, is understanding and anticipating need and starting to commission years in advance. And that's that point I was making about future service users. If we can talk to young people, parents and carers earlier, because we're working with them instead of what was a disconnect, then we can start commissioning with housing colleagues and others the provision that will meet those needs. And linked to that, it is not just about accommodation, it's about opportunity. Councillor Reid talked about upstream, the industrial strategy, and we are very committed to having our users, our care experienced young people and young adults with additional needs, disabled young adults, supporting them into meaningful supported work employment opportunities. So it's about the holistic offer, and that's what we want to achieve in this new direction.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Do you have a follow-up question? I want to invite.
Yes, it's actually Dr. Lang. Okay. Did I hear you correctly when you, what I thought you might have said was about the drug and alcohol area, which is obviously of major concern because of this is not a league table. We want to be #1 on with suicides. Now, do we have sufficient capacity for those that ordinarily, if everything was open-ended, if we had, that we would be able to take everybody in that you would normally say actually has an issue and they are at risk? Do we have that, or are we saying that we've got 20 that are saying more complex and more likely to be suicidal that we provide provision for, or are we saying potentially there are 30 in that, but we haven't got the capacity? So it's a bit of an odd way of saying that. And is it only related to drug and alcohol, or do we take those that may have an addiction in pornography or with pornography?
Sorry, just the suicide was a separate piece of work.
Yep.
It wasn't linked with the, shall I answer the drug and alcohol
Yes,
addiction?
please. Yes.
Yeah, we do. Drug and alcohol is, as you'll know, it's difficult. It relies on personal choice in some ways. We do actually go out looking for people. The most fruitful grounds to look for people are, as you'd expect, prison, the probation service, police cells, and also mental health services and accident and emergency. In our new service, we have hugely ramped that up. So our Charing Cross model of alcohol and drug nurses in A&E and on the wards is reaping the rewards. That's where we got our numbers in treatment. We have co-located drug and alcohol workers in the probation office. We now have passes to be in our custody suite. I'm going to point the wrong way, but because I have no sense of, So on Shepherd's Bush Road in the police station, all the custody are open to us now. And that is where we found our numbers in treatment. It's not hard. It's just we weren't working in the right way when we had two separate services. But it has been very satisfying to see that all the places where I look for my users, they're now coming to us. And then when we have politicians who raise concerns about their neighborhoods, we will walk on the street with the LET team, going hand in hand and looking for people. So, and we also have in-reach to all our 8 homeless hostels at least once or twice a week. So wherever we think we have our users, we will go. We'll act on local intelligence as well. I'll go out myself. So anything that we hear about, discarded needles, people in distress, the service will go out immediately. It's responsive, so happy to send people anywhere that you choose.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at the screen, and we've got Lucia with her hand raised. Lucia, over to you, please.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. It was just really sort of a follow-up regarding housing. I know you slightly dealt with it just then, Nikki, about going out once a week, etc. But how connected are you with homelessness, social care, independent living? Are you providing temporary accommodation? Are you always, I mean, somebody housing is providing that, but how connected are you with that and ensuring that homeless people are not going back on the streets once they've been picked up or supported? And are they then supported by social care or provided with independent living where there's a need?
Yeah, Lucia, very good question. We have the offer, and it is a very I'm not going to say aggressive, a very much an in-reach offer. So we have 8 homeless hostels with 150 residents plus another 100 in short stay hotels. They all have an excellent offer from drug and alcohol services. Just to say, our drug and alcohol service has a clinical psychologist, Dr. Effie Kavatha, because a lot of the time our drug and alcohol clients have what we call dual diagnosis. So they actually have a severe and enduring mental illness as well. We have that same offer because we have an integrated service to all of our mental health supported accommodation. So all of the places, I won't mention them, where we have vulnerable mental health clients, we've now evened the playing field for them. So they get drug and alcohol support. It's been a golden thread or whatever you want to call it throughout my time in the borough. I'm interested in drugs and alcohol anyway, but I am told when anyone is in distress, needs sectioning, whatever, I'm probably the first person they call. It doesn't matter whether it's me or not, but I do know whenever anyone's feeling a bit wobbly. We've also commissioned an in-reach service from Central Northwest London, which is another big mental health trust in Northwest London for dual diagnosis specifically. That is 2 very expert dual diagnosis nurses who are also expert prescribers, and that has reduced hugely the number of crises that I get called to where someone needs sectioning. And we work very closely with Jonathan Carter, who is one of Catherine Wilmot's team, who is excellent, work closely with the AMPs. But I have to say, since we commissioned that CNWL service, I don't get called pretty much at all by the AMPs. We don't have crises, we don't have people on the roof anymore, apart from a few issues. So yeah, it's been, we know where everybody is. We work with them weekly, daily. Sometimes we chair MDTs about them, but having the integrated service and also the join up with mental health services has made a big difference. It is the challenge of our time, dual diagnosis. As we all know, 80% of mental health clients have a substance misuse issue and vice versa, all the Section 136. But it's what I love, and this borough has certainly richly given us those clients, unfortunately.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lang. I'm looking at colleagues who are joining us remotely. Are there other hands raised? I don't see any other hands. Thank you very much. I have one question for Sarah, please. So you alluded to how as part of this transformation journey, we are working with partners. And also you alluded to how we're working with the voluntary sector. Can you please give us some examples of how of the vision that you have in terms of those partnerships, what we're doing at the moment, and how we plan to expand these collaborations?
I think it's multifaceted, actually. I think we have a very rich community sector, and we absolutely need to work together in partnership to really think about the kinds of services that our community sector can provide, and they are the experts at providing, but also to help us shape the services that we need to provide in response. As I said earlier, it is a whole system piece, and it's a spectrum and a continuum of support. So we want to work and support our community sectors to be able to provide as much support as they possibly can. We can't do everything. That's the reality of the situation. There is a role to play for the Third Sector Investment Fund in supporting that sector to be able to do that for us. And we will work in partnership to think about what's that continuum and the journey of support so that we can then support those who need more support, additional support, right through to the other end of the system.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Are there further questions in relation to the agenda item, please? I'm looking at the screen. Okay, well, thank you so much. So, think about the corporate budget, Councillor Rees, thank you so much. I think there's consensus in members of the PAC of the positive proposal that you made this evening. As you said, we are protecting the people that we're serving. We're protecting those statutory services and at the same time generating efficiencies. From the report, I mean, some of the examples that I've read, having a comprehensive council tax support scheme, continuing the free home care services as well, provision of key services, for example, the law enforcement team and the maintaining as well those weekly bin collections, and establishing innovative services as the family hub. as well, of course, as the investment done in the adult social care department as well, and other services working in collaboration. Also, thank you so much to the office this evening. Very reassuring, Jackie, what you said at the beginning, how this refreshed vision is underpinned by those core values. Good to hear about the adult social care achievements and some of the examples that you've given, the annual review team, the transitions team, how we've improved that assessment process and the workforce strategy. Thank you very much as well, Nicola, for the public health achievements as well that you've alluded to in terms of the suicide prevention campaign, integrative services, and the drug and alcohol services, and how we're responding to some of those challenges that we have, and responding creatively as well. So some of those more rather challenges in terms of the demographic changes and demands, but how we're also responding with a whole system approach, and how this is a journey, and understanding more about that strategic intentions that we have, and how we're working in collaboration and partnership with other local partners. So yes, thank you very much. Thank you all for your questions as well. So if there are no further comments or questions, I think we can move on to the next agenda item. Oh, sorry, before that, the recommendation of the report is that the Policy and Accountability Committee considers the budget proposals and makes recommendations to Cabinet as appropriate, that the committee considers the proposed changes to fees and charges and makes recommendations as appropriate. Are we all in agreement to this recommendation? Great, thank you very much. Okay, so the next agenda item is the dates of future meetings, and the date of our next meeting is the 28th of April. So I think we've reached the end of the meeting. Thank you very much to colleagues joining us remotely, also to colleagues joining us this evening, and to officers as well, and also those who are watching. Thank you. Thank you.